Hey, it's Scott Weiss again with Lessons on Leaving, your complete guide to funerals. Hey, once again, we're here to talk to you about the subject of death, the death care industry, funerals. Hope that you're getting a lot out of these videos. I'm sure enjoying presenting them to you. I want to talk to you today about something that is often occurs around death, but something that is not often talked about as a subject, and that is humor. What do you mean humor? Why are we laughing around the time of death? Well, I'm going to tell you what, there's a buffer system, I believe, within mankind somehow, and the way that we deal with such a serious subject of death, and we can balance it out with humor. And just I want to relate a story or two to you about my experience as a funeral director. Anyone who says that they have been around a funeral home or worked there as a funeral director at some time or another doesn't get a little bit scared or a little bit creeped out. There's some adjustments that have to be made when you first start working there, and then you become an old professional. But there's a lot of cutting up, there's a lot of jokes and humor, and I believe it's because we as humans are offsetting the seriousness of death with the lightheartedness. It brings that balance into being somehow. There's a lot of people who use humor to bring up the subject of death, to talk about death with jokes or humors or funny clips from movies and things like that. And we'll talk more about this in the future as well. But I remember at the funeral home, we would do things oftentimes to lighten up a situation. I remember one time we actually, as a deputy coroner and as a funeral director, I worked a plane crash where we had 18 people who unfortunately all perished in a plane crash. And we're in a room identifying the remains, the people. You cannot just use their wallet that might be in their pocket. They have to be identified by either their fingerprints or their dental record. And without getting into detail, when you have a plane crash, a lot of times it's very difficult to identify the individual. So obviously we have people from the FBI in the room, we have people from the coroner's office, the media is everywhere, it's a big event, and it's obviously very serious and sad, and I cannot tell you how many one-liners and jokes and cutting up was flying around the room. And I didn't believe it was disrespectful toward the people who had passed away or toward the family. It's just our human way of dealing with the incredible sorrow and sadness of death. And so I advise people sometimes, you might see a funeral director or a police officer on a scene of something that's tragic, and maybe they're over on the side laughing, and it's not that they mean to be disrespectful, but can you imagine seeing that all the time or seeing that every day, and you have to have something, I don't know if the psychological studies have been done on this, but something to balance that out. One time I was going down to the funeral home into our cooler to get a lady ready to be cremated, and of course they have to be in a corrugated box, much like a big cardboard box, which helps facilitate getting them into the crematory, the retort. And so I was going down there, and I asked one of the other guys to come help me, and on the way the phone rang, and so I stopped to answer the phone and spent a few minutes with a phone call. And then when I went over to the cooler to get the particular lady who was going to be cremated, I didn't know where my coworker was, and so I was looking around, I couldn't find him. I said, well, I'll do it by myself, because you can do it by yourself, but it's just easier having someone else. And so I opened the refrigerator where we keep people, and we had about capacity of about 8 to 10 bodies that we could have in there. And instead of just grabbing the one person that had to be cremated and identify them, I always would account for everyone in there, so that it was like a double way of checking to make sure I had the right person. So I was, okay, this is Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so, and I knew who that was, and I knew who this was, and so I started to roll the cot out with the lady that needed to be cremated, and I recognized that I don't know who this is. And so, I picked up a sheet, and I saw a pair of shoes. And I thought, I don't remember who this is. And as I picked that sheet up to see who was in there, my coworker sat right up. And I know that my eyes got big as saucers. And I remember specifically the moment when my heart missed several beats, and I saw him there, and he obviously scared the fire out of me and had the greatest laugh. He was inside a cooler at about 40 degrees with 5 dead bodies underneath a sheet waiting for me to come down there so he could scare me. And he did. So those are kind of funny things that might happen. I often regret not keeping a diary and recording everything that happened on a daily basis. I would have the most phenomenal book. But just wanted you to know it's not a disrespectful thing. It's probably a good thing in the human psyche that we balance the seriousness of death with humor. And a lot of times, like I said, humor can be very useful to get people to talk about death. But again, this is Scott Weiss with Lessons on Leaving, your complete guide to funerals. Be sure and leave a comment. Maybe you have a funny story. I'd love to hear it associated with a funeral home or a death. I know there's a lot of those kind of things on the web, on the internet. But thanks for listening. Go to YouTube, give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down, like me on Facebook. Again, subscribe to my newsletter. I've had a lot of positive feedback on my 11-page funeral planning guide. And so you need to get one and you need to get it filled out. And to do that, all you have to do is subscribe to my newsletter at lessonsonleaving.com or scottveiss.com. So good talking to you, and we'll see you again next time.